these eyes before. Just what the truth is, I can't tell anymore. 'Cause I love you. Yes, I love you. Oh, how I love you. Oh, yeah.
So this is a different one than I normally would talk about or review. But it turns out I do have sort of a guilty pleasure when it comes to romance. And romance movies and shows. Now, not like your typical romances usually. There's usually some sort of historical or fantastical element that I need for me to really get into romances. But a lot of them have that. One of my guilty pleasure movies, even though it's a super downer, is Legends of the Fall. And that's a romance. I like romantic elements in things. Like, I think that what makes Braveheart work so well is the fact that he has this great romance that's disrupted and turned into tragedy and revenge. And this new show, My Lady Jane, on Amazon, is a romance. And it is a period romance. It takes place during the Tudor era after the death of King Henry. But it is a fantasy version. It is a revisionist history. There is a historical figure, Lady Jane Grey, who was queen for 9 days before she had her head lopped off. Lot of beheadings back then. In this story, which is based on a book, they change that. Basically, they want to give her more of a story. So they tell a revisionist history, and they just go all out. So there's no, they're not like worried about race, right? King Edward is black. They're not worried about modern language, and they actually include a lot of modern music as well. In some senses, this is like a recipe for disaster for me. Like, I would hate this in another show, right? But I actually really, really liked this show, so I will explain why. For one thing, by being very overtly revisionist, by being ahistorical on purpose and setting that tone right from the get-go, it sort of, gives them permission to do whatever they want. And they're telling you this is not a serious history. Don't think that we're actually telling what really happened. We are very much not doing that. It's very similar to The Great on Hulu, about Catherine the Great with Elle Fanning and Nicholas Hoult, which is a wonderful show. See, I really like that one also. That one's darker, though. That one is actually quite dark in a lot of ways, a lot of black comedy. But this one is much more upbeat and feel good. It has its dark stuff too, but it's much more of a romance, whereas The Great is much more of a cynical critique of romance in a lot of ways. But both have lots of diversity and all the rest, and they're just colorblind shows. The skin color is never acknowledged. But they're also, they're just goofy comedies, and so I'm okay with this. Whereas when you look at something that's supposed to be a serious history and they do that takes me out of it, right? So like The Winter King, for instance, and they have a Black Merlin. This is supposed to be a serious, historically based show based on Bernard Cornwell's books, which are, steeped in actual historical, he makes it a fictional story, but he tries to be accurate to the time, right? So when you go and you just mess around with that, like they did with that adaptation, and they're taking themselves seriously, well, I can't take that seriously. But I can take something like The Great or My Lady Jane with a grain of salt, because that's, the narrator says in the very beginning of the show, fuck history. Okay, I love history, but I also like, if you're going to change it and you're going to make it your own thing, that's cool too. In this particular world, there's not just this change to the characters and the fate of Lady Jane Grey, but also there's a fantasy element where there's people called Ethians who can turn into their animal form. So each person that's an Ethian has one animal form. Maybe it's a bear, maybe it's a bird or a mouse, just depends. But there's also the people who can't change, who are called Verity, and they're kind of in control of everything. And the Verity have created laws that sort of keep these two societies divided, and the Ethians are sort of banished. And this actually reminds me a bit of Wicked, the Gregory Maguire books. They were also turned into a musical where there's talking animals and they're sort of like second-class citizens. But anyways, then you have Jane Grey, and she gets involved what I like about this character, at first you think, okay, this is going to be a girl boss story. You know, she's very fiercely independent. She doesn't want to get married, yada, yada, yada. Like, she wants to publish this book. And, you know, you're like, okay, this is like, it took me a minute in the first episode. I was like, I don't know if this is for me at all, actually. But then they write her to be an actually flawed character. She makes a lot of mistakes. She's strong-willed, strong-headed, but that often gets her in trouble. She constantly realizes that she's not going to get what she wants, and that she's actually sheltered and naive. And that's great. I actually find creating characters who have flaws and who butt up against their limitations and fuck up. I think that's great. That's why girl bosses in modern cinema and modern TV are so annoying, because they just conquer everything. They just beat up all the guys and they have no problem. You know, it's boring. It's bland. Well, that's not the case here, and I like that. They also don't make all the guys into idiots, right? Like, all the characters are quirky, and some of them are idiots for sure. But even the ones who you think at first are going to be just the biggest idiots around, like maybe even despicable, some of them become the most endearing characters by the end. And I like that. So this show doesn't shit on men and to prop up women. It actually just treats everybody the same. Like, the villain in the show is a woman and her accomplice is a man. And it's a very entertaining show. I mean, more than anything, it's just entertaining. It has the romance qualities that people like the will they, won't they stuff. It has some cool twists and turns. It's got some stuff that I didn't see coming. Some nice surprises in the first couple episodes, and it's just all around a fun show. And I think that I love it when a new story just is entirely what it is, right? They're not trying to appeal to a different audience. I mean, romance generally appeals to women, right? And this is definitely geared towards women. I like it, and I don't want that to change. Like, there's enough there for me also. And I've talked about this in the past, where like when they're taking Star Wars and other things that are generally geared towards guys, and then they're trying to change the audience to be more geared towards women. Now, I think it's fine to want to appeal to a wider audience, but I think you need to preserve what makes something work, right? And those nerdy things like Star Wars, they work really well for guys, and the more you change that, the more you start to lose. I think a lot of the women who like those things start to lose interest in them also, you know. So this is a show that I would say is definitely more geared towards women, but it's a lot of fun, and I think it would be a great show to watch as a couple. It's a great show, and I just watched it by myself, and I thought it was fantastic. I don't think it qualifies. You know, a lot of people probably look at this and think, oh, it's woke or whatever, but it really, you know, whatever. It really isn't. It's just goofy revisionist history romance with a fun fantasy element and a lot of great characters. Actually, a lot of great characters. So, and it's well written. The dialogue's witty. The actors are great. Just overall, you know, if you liked The Great, this is a similar show with more magic, because The Great doesn't have any, and it's a little less dark and a little more uplifting and a little more romantic. So if that fits your you know, what you enjoy, I think you'll enjoy this show, and I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching. Be sure to leave a comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and peace.